everyone, it is Matt here from Scoop in Response, and today we are looking at a new deck for a commander that was spoiled just recently for the upcoming D&D set for the crossover, Tiamat. So I'm not a D&D player myself, but I guess you see Tiamat in a whole range of different franchises, so I thought, hey, it's probably a pretty cool card for us to build a deck around. So the way that we're building this deck is we are using the new card from Strixhaven, Dragon's Approach, which is 2 and a red sorcery. Dragon's Approach deals 3 damage to each opponent. You may exile Dragon's Approach and 4 cards named Dragon's Approach from your graveyard. If you do, search your library for a dragon creature card, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle. A deck can have any number of cards named Dragon's Approach. So essentially, we are playing huge, big, giant, scary dragon tribal. It's really simple in its deck construction. I believe the list will be really cheap as well if you don't mind about having tap lands. So the list that I've put together, I think it's about 850 or thereabouts in terms of the total cost in US dollars, but most of that comes from 10 shock lands. So you cut those and you've automatically got yourself a whole bunch of savings. All of the creatures in the actual deck themselves are really cheap. So let's take a look at the commander. Tiamat is a legendary creature dragon god for 2 and Wooburg, and it has flying. When Tiamat enters the battlefield, if you cast it, search your library for up to 5 dragon cards not named Tiamat that each have different names, reveal them, and then put them into your hand and shuffle. So really sweet. We're going to be playing a whole number of Dragon's Approach, and we're going to be getting all of our biggest and baddest dragons from the history of Magic onto the battlefield, and we're just going to be spewing out all of these big threats each turn. And the cool thing about Dragon's Approach is that it deals damage to each opponent. So we actually have a pretty reasonable burn backup in our arsenal as well. So I realize that 3 for 3 is actually not that great, but when it's hitting all of our opponents at the same time, it's really sweet. So I'm going to show you some cool cards that work with that as well. Let's check out the creatures first of all. So for creatures, we've got a total of 22. We've got 5 non-dragon cards in the list. So Birds, Deathrite Shaman, Llanowar Elves, and Noble Hierarch are just dorks. They're just acceleration that are just going to do everything that we need them to do. We just want some turn 1 plays because we've got a lot of very expensive cards, as you can see, in terms of their mana cost. The last non-dragon creature is Archmage Emeritus, which is Magecraft. Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, draw a card. So this is just every time we Dragon's Approach, we get to draw a card and hopefully it replaces itself or gives us another land. So very sweet there. So that's all there is to the non-dragons. Now, each of the other dragons in the deck, they all have a different, I guess, utility. And I would say that you do not need to follow this to a T. If you don't have these dragons, or if you think that I've missed one that's super relevant, by all means chuck it in. It does not matter at all. I have chosen the ones that I've picked mostly because I think that we can get the most value from getting a discount using Morophon the Boundless. So Morophon is a changeling, but because changeling works in every single zone, it means that we can fish him out with our commander or with the Dragon's Approach. So essentially, we get this out onto the battlefield, and then we reduce the cost of all of our dragons very significantly. The other big, I guess, choice in terms of bringing out a Haymaker first and foremost is the Dragon. So the Dragon is 4 and Wooburg, and it has, when 1 or more dragons you control attack, draw that many cards, then you may put a permanent card from your hand onto the battlefield. So really sweet card. It also makes, when it's on the battlefield, all of your dragons cost 1 colorless less. So between Morophon and the Dragon, you're actually getting a 6 mana discount on quite a lot of the creatures in this deck. So really sweet overall with that. Those are probably your first 2 targets that you want to get out. From there, we've just got a whole range of value, so we'll go over them one by one. Korvold, Fakehurst King is a draw engine, it's a sack outlet. We don't really care too much about sack, but with cards like, what is the name of it? It is the Oh gosh, too many big dragons. Bladewing the Risen. When it ETBs, you may return a dragon permanent card from the graveyard to the battlefield, and then it's got sort of fire breathing to give it +1/+1 until end of turn, but that's to all dragons. So you can do cool things like, use Corvold to sack something that gives you a good ETB value, and then you bring Bladewing the Risen onto the battlefield to get that back. So really sweet interactions there, and you've just got insane pump with that as well. The next card we've got is Scion of the Dragon. So you can pay 2 to search a library for a dragon card and put it into your graveyard. If you do, the Scion of the Dragon becomes a copy of that card, which is just sweet. It's a tutor, so you're digging for things out of the graveyard. I'm not running any reanimate spells, but you do have access to a reanimate with Bladewing. So yeah, ultimately I would say that this list is built for simplicity, and over time people are going to find the way that they're going to enjoy particular interactions with dragons. This is just throwing you all the haymakers all at once. So yeah, really sweet interaction there with Scion. Terror of the Peaks is just for additional scary stuff. So spells your opponents cast at target Terror of the Peaks cost an additional 3 life to cast. So it's basically ward 3 life. And whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, Terror of the Peaks deals damage equal to that creature's power to any target. So yeah, absolutely insane for controlling the field. All of our dragons are so big and powerful that we can, have something come in and it just deals 8 damage or 9 damage right off the bat just by having Terror of the Peaks out, and that's at any target as well. So really useful. Wasatora Nekoru Queen. It's a Jund with 2 flying and trample. Does combat damage. It makes them sack, and if they can't, you get extra dragons. So really sweet there. Amarith the Lustrious. So I included this one mostly because you get that 4 mana discount, when you've got Morophon and the Dragon. But it is a pretty cool thing that you can, because we have pretty much an even split between creatures, lands, and sorceries. You've got a good chance of getting creature, or you've got land as the trigger for that. So yeah, effectively it's kind of like a bit of a ramp. It's a bit of a card draw engine in that regards. Dragon Broodmother, a really sweet card, makes a whole bunch of tokens. Dragonlord Dramoka is a great way to sort of stop your opponents from interacting with the board on your turn, so they can't stop your combat tricks because it has flying, lifelink, and your opponent can't cast spells during your turn. Dragonlord Colligan, flying and haste, gives everything haste. Whenever an opponent casts a creature or planeswalker spell with the same name as a card in his or her graveyard, that player loses 10 life. So that's obviously not going to make any difference in Commander, but it's still got the whole text. Maybe you're going to play against Relentless Rats, who knows. Okagachi Vengefulkami is another just free creature once you have the Morophon and Dragon out. So it has, whenever you deal combat damage to a player, if it attacked you during your last turn, you can exile target non-land permanent that player controls. So essentially you're encouraged to swing big with this deck. So this is kind of giving you a bit of extra oomph when people swing back. So great include there, and can be free. We've got the Abzan Teneb the Harvester, deals combat damage to a player. You can put target creature card in the graveyard into play under your control. So if you're using a Scion, you can then reanimate with that. Bladewing the Risen, we went over that one. Darigus Reincarnated, so for 4 and Jund, flying, trample, haste. If it would die, exile it instead with 3 egg counters, and then it comes back after those egg counters are removed. Very cool. Carthless Tyrant of Jund, gain control of all dragons, untap all dragons, and other dragon creatures you control have haste. Just absolutely insane. Morophon, Dragon we've spoken about. The last 2 we've got Velamarcus Lawhold, so flying, haste, vigilance. When it attacks, you look at the top 7 cards, choose an instant or sorcery with lower mana value than this creature, and you can cast it without paying its mana cost. So it's just another way to get another Dragon's Approach onto the field. Hellcat Overlord is another one. It's 4 black, red, green, flying, trample, haste. It's got fire breathing and regeneration, and it's an 8/8, so it's super big and really sweet overall. So those are the 17 big Haymaker dragons. You could probably add a few more. I just can't imagine a world where if you're able to get 17 dragons out onto the battlefield, I don't know how you couldn't have already killed someone just with those burn spells anyway. So it would be very weird if you actually ran out of dragons. Next up, we have spells, artifacts, enchantments, everything else. So really light, aside from the 32 copies of Dragon's Approach, which you will see. We've got Farseek, 3 visits, Cultivate, just for a little bit of land ramp. We've got Dragon Storm, which is absolutely sweet. Search your library for a dragon card and put it into play, then shuffle, and it has Storm. So it's 9 mana. You know, you're very rarely going to get more than 1 or 2 dragons for this, but you know, there might be some magical Christmas land where you can just go and get a whole bunch of dragons because, you know, some people have been doing some shenanigans on your turn, or you've just had a lot of cost reduction overall. So really sweet card, you know, it can just win the game on the spot. Utopia Sprawl, it's just rainbow land ramp, so really sweet, or rather rainbow ramp, so very useful. Greater Good, it's a sack outlet, but it's also lets you draw. So you know, you've got so many huge creatures. You've got buffs as well, so essentially whenever you sacrifice that creature, you're going to get to draw, you know, between 5 to 10 cards, so it's pretty useful for that to keep the engine going. We've got Mana Crypt, Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, Ruby Medallion, all should be pretty straightforward. Return of the Wild Speaker, another huge draw card. So the only one that's probably a bit spicy that you may have not seen before is Locket of Yesterdays. So it says, spells you play cost 1 less to play for each card with the same name as that spell in your graveyard. So that means that all of your Dragon's Approaches quickly become 1 mana, you know, Lava Spike on each of your opponents. So 1 mana, get to cast it instead of 3 after that, the first 2 being in the bin. You've just got to be mindful that once you exile, obviously that resets your counter down again, but absolutely sweet in the way that it ramps just so hard, or allows you to cast so many more spells. So, you know, that might be an instance where you can get a huge Dragon Storm count. So if you manage to, you know, go Dragon's Approach, you get 3 of them out, and then, you know, you play a free creature from your hand as well, and then you Dragon Storm, you've got Storm count 5 or 6, absolutely huge, getting 5 massive dragons onto the field. You should probably win there. I don't know how you wouldn't if you've got, you know, 20 to, what would it be, you know, 40 power or so worth of power coming out with haste and trample and flying. So yeah, it's going to be absolutely massive if that kind of scenario happens, even though it is a bit of a magical Christmas land. Wrapping up the deck, we have lands. So it is really straightforward here. If you have these lands, put them in your deck. If you have dual lands, put them in your deck. If you have fetch lands, put them in your deck. I have put all of the shocks, I've put all of the draw lands, so Bountiful Promenade, Fiery Islet, and Waterlogged Grove. I think they're great. I put the Triomes in, and I've put all of the more than one opponent lands as well. All of those things are absolutely not critical for this deck. I would say just pick a balanced mana base. You need access to red for all of the Dragon's Approach, but it only costs 1 red anyway, so you're not too worried about it. But yeah, having a balanced, I'd say the Triomes are really useful. Stick to Rainbow lands if you want to add them in, you know, your Mana Confluence, your Forbidden Orchid, all of that kind of stuff. City of Brask. It's the sky's the limit with a 5-color mana base like this. Ultimately, it's whatever works for you as far as your budget and how much access you want, and you know, the risk of mana skew obviously increases a bit more as you go down the power of those lands. So that's pretty much it. There's nothing real crazy. You know, you can stick things like your Cavern of Souls and that kind of stuff in there if you want to have uncounterable dragons. But the reality is you're most likely going to have most of your dragons coming in, being cheated in, or coming in for free through Dragon's Approach anyway. So not super critical for that. So that is the deck. Thank you so much for looking at the video. I really hope you enjoyed the content. I will be posting more regularly in the coming weeks as the spoiler season starts to kick off for Modern Horizons 2. No doubt we're going to get some crazy, weird, and wonderful cards with that. If you like the channel and you've enjoyed it, I would love any share, like, follow, you know, all of that kind of jazz. The channel's been growing really well as of late, and I'm just really excited to keep that going. Anyway, thanks so much for that, and bye for now.